Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Spreadsheets 102. Today's session is the second in a multi-part series on spreadsheets. This session is part of a series of free webinars offered every week or two by Stark Portage Area Computer Consortium, or SPARC for short. SPARC is an information technology center in Northeast Ohio where we support about 30 school districts. However, this webinar is open to everyone, and we'd like to welcome all the people who have joined us live today or those who are watching the recording in the future. My name is Anthony Luscre, and I am the Technology Integration Specialist at SPARC, and I will be your presenter for this session today. My colleague, Eric Kurtz, will be manning the live Google Doc for questions and/or comments. The live doc, as well as all the resources for today's webinar, can be found at tiny.cc/SPARCC214. So that's tiny.cc/SPARC214. And I would encourage you to go to that site if you have not already done so. That link will take you out to our technology integration site, where you will find all the resources for the session today, including this live stream, help guides, live session chat document, a session evaluation, a short quiz to take to earn a certificate of attendance for 1 contact hour. While you're there, also please be sure to check out our upcoming schedule of PD events, recorded training of past webinars, including especially the one on Spreadsheets 101. Also sign up for our Spark Lines newsletter to always stay up to date with our latest tech integration information. And finally, if you need to get in touch with us, you can find our contact information under the contact menu link. Back to today's presentation. On Spreadsheets 102. As I said earlier, some of you may have watched the first session, Spreadsheets 101. If you have not, I suggest you may want to watch that. It is more beginner-based. This is starting to get into some of the intermediate tools. And today we'll be focusing on a number of the functions that are available in spreadsheets. We're going to be utilizing Google Spreadsheets today, but almost everything we're going to be talking about is applicable to almost every spreadsheet program out there, including Excel, OpenOffice, StarOffice, LibreOffice. Almost all the concepts will be the same. If they are not the same, I'll try and mention the differences so that you can utilize these resources with whatever operating system and/or software program you're utilizing. From our link page, you will see that we have a list of useful spreadsheet functions. And I'm going to bring that up on the screen here. It's one of the resources listed on our page. And this document is laid out in such a fashion that it has first the category of the different types of functions. Next, there's a little E or G. If E is there, that means it's available in Excel. If G is there, it means it's available in Google. And as you notice, most of these are available in both. The next column shows our function itself. Then our next column shows a usage. And then we have a description from Excel help and from Google help. And most of the time, the descriptions are very similar. The descriptions are hyperlinks, which will take you to further information on that particular function. You can also utilize the filtering function if you'd like to filter down and only see specific types of functions at a given time. The list is quite long. It is color-coded on the left to help you determine which type of function you're in. So I've created some fake spreadsheets today. Before we get started, let me just mention, if you ever need to generate a large number of fake data, I like the fakenamegenerator.com. It's a free site available where you can either create one fake identity or you can create many. It also lets you choose what fields you'd like to include. So today, our spreadsheet is from fakename.com. So all the information we'll be utilizing today, don't worry, they are not real people. And this is our basic spreadsheet, and I have created a number of worksheets at the bottom. If you're not familiar with creating additional worksheets, you'd press the plus button and it will add an additional sheet. You can also click on the little arrow next to the description, you can rename the sheet, you can color code it, you can do a variety of things with it from that little drop down arrow on the right. Now, the first thing we want to talk about is the fact that if you have multiple worksheets, that you can utilize data across those. So I'm just going to drag this spreadsheet over a little bit here, and we're going to create a new spreadsheet worksheet. And it will create it with a number. We will just call this data on other worksheet. Now, you can copy data on from another worksheet, but what will happen is you'll detach it and it will then not make the changes on the original. So if we want a lot of the changes to be made on the original and to show up on this sheet, we need to use a formula to reference that data. So let's do a quick formula here. We're going to put the equal sign in. Actually, let's click in the right cell here first. Let's click in A1. We're going to put the equal sign in, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom, change to the worksheet, the main worksheet, and I'm going to choose some information. Now, you'll notice real quickly here that it says equals the name of the tab, the worksheet tab, then it has an exclamation point. That exclamation point is very important. That tells you that the data is on another worksheet. And then it tells you what cell we want to start with. We actually want to start with cell A1, so we will change that. We will press enter, and it will return us back to our original sheet, and you will now see that we have the first cell from our fake name generator worksheet on our data on other worksheet. I can use the drag function to copy the information. I can also use the drag down. So all this information is referenced from that sheet. If we make a change here, we really can't do that because this is not truly Linda here. It's actually just referring to the cell on the other worksheet where the name Linda is there. But let's just watch what happens if I go back to the original sheet and let's change Linda's name to Mary. Press enter, return to our worksheet, and you'll notice that our data, because it is linked, changes automatically. If for some reason I would want this data to be fixed and not be a reference to the sheet, I would need to copy it first. Then I can simply do a paste special and paste it as values. Once I do that, the data becomes detached, and you'll notice we do no longer have formulas, but in fact we actually have data here. And that's what I really wanted to demonstrate with this, again, was the fact that you can link data between worksheets. One of the keys is in the equation, you will see the exclamation point. I'm going to talk about that as we go along, just to stress the importance of that. So I'm done with this data on the other worksheet tab here, so I can simply click on this, and I can go up and I can say that I want to delete that worksheet. And it's going to say, are you sure you want to delete that? It doesn't delete the whole spreadsheet, just the simple worksheet at the bottom. So the next thing we want to talk about is something we briefly touched on in Spreadsheets 101, and I want to talk a little bit more about, and that is called concatenation. Concatenation is a fancy word for putting information from one or more cells, from two or more cells, into one cell. So let's take a look at how we can use concatenation. So I'm going to go over to a section here with some additional information on it. And again, you can scroll back and forth between the variety of tabs that you might have open by just clicking on them. But what we want to do is we want to go back to our first sheet here. So let me just go all the way to the left. And we are going to create a field that has the complete name. Notice right now we have first, middle, and last. So I'm going to click on the little drop down arrow, and I'm going to say insert one column to the left. And you'll notice now we have a blank column. I can then use the concatenate function. And if you notice, when you start typing it in, it's really nice because you don't have to remember how to spell it, which is one of my problems. And there's concatenation. It also tells us what it's going to do. We click on it, and now it asks us, which cells do you want data from? Well, what we want is we want the first name and the last name. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the first name, and then I'm going to put in a colon and click on the other, I'm sorry, let's try that again one more time. Put a comma in, then click on the other cell that I want the data from. And notice now that it combined the two cells. So again, the formula is concatenate, first cell, comma, second cell, and we could have a comma and continue with additional information. Now you notice that one thing is very strange here. What happened? Well, it combined it just like we asked it to, but what it did not do is it did not include a space. So we need to put the space in manually if we'd like that. We can do it a number of different ways. We could simply go back to our original formula here, put a quote mark, type in space, put another quote mark, and put another comma, and now it will include that in our formula. So you notice our function concatenate takes the information from cell B2. The next information we give it is a space. The next information we give it is from cell D2. You can also do concatenation manually by using the ampersand. So if we wanted to do concatenation that way, we would click on the first cell we want. We'd hold down the shift key and press the 7. That gives us the ampersand key. Again, we'd use the quote marks and put a space in there. Anytime you want to add additional information that's not actually in a cell, you need to put it in quotes so it knows that you want that information. Use another ampersand, click on the last name, and now you notice that it worked the same way. So you can concatenate using either the concatenate function or you can do it with ampersands. It's totally up to you. And again, as always, we can copy our formula down, and we can copy it down to the very end of our spreadsheet and have the names go all the way down. I think we have quite a few here. Looks like we're over 150. So now let's go back up to the top. So that is concatenation. And again, putting information from two or more cells into one cell. Now, just as we did earlier, you'll notice that this really is not Mary Brand. This is actually equals B2 plus space plus D2. So if we want to convert this truly into that name, we would need to copy this and then paste special. So I'm going to do it with the whole column. I'm going to copy the column. And then I'm going to paste special, and I'm going to choose values. Now when we go back and look at Mary Brand, you'll see that it is truly the data and not a formula there. So always remember to use the paste special if you want to convert from the formula to displaying the actual data. Now, as you'll notice here, whoever created this put in all capital letters for the cities. Now, I really didn't want capital letters for the cities, so let's change that. And again, if you're a really fast typist, please feel free to retype it, but I'm not that fast of a typist. So I'm going to click on the little drop down, and I'm going to add one column to the right for our purposes. In that column, we will correct this and we'll make it into a proper name. So the way that works is we will use the function called proper. So equals proper, put in the cell we want, and then just press enter. And you notice it makes it into a proper, capitalizes the proper words. We can drag it up, we can drag it all the way down to the bottom. And you notice that it takes care of all of our words. Now, sometimes you may run into a problem if there's an apostrophe or if something actually starts with a lowercase letter. But for the most part, this is a good way to take something that is very annoying and all in caps and convert it into something that would normally be more likely that you'd want to read. Again, this is still just a formula. It is not actually data. So we're going to copy this column and we're going to actually paste it over top of the original one. So we're going to go paste special, and we're going to do values only. And now you notice our data has changed. So now we have two columns. We can get rid of our original column here by deleting that column. And now we have our city in a nice proper format. Now I wanted my state in capital, so we're not going to change that. Now, if you look over in column E, we have the gender of each individual. And again, it's in lowercase. It looks sort of odd. And you know what? It takes up a lot more space than it really needs to. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a couple changes. First, I'm going to shorten this word So we used to have gender. Now what I want to do is I want, in fact, to convert all the females to F and all the males to M. Now I could do that using the find and replace function, simply clicking on that on this column, going up using the edit, find and replace, and I can replace female with just the letter M, with just the letter F. But I want to show you how we can do it using a function. So what we're going to do is we're going to again insert a column to the right for our working space, and we're going to simply take the function called left. We're going to type left in, and we're going to tell it we want the information from this cell. The next thing we do is we're going to put a comma in, and the second part of a function is called the argument. The argument, or arguments in some cases, basically tell the function how you want it to operate. So we've told it what we want it to operate on, cell E2. Now we need to tell it what we want to do as far as the operation. We've already said left. What we need to do, though, is tell it how many characters from the left we want. In this case, we only want the first character, so we'll simply put a 1. If I wanted 2 characters, I could put a 2 in there and so forth. Press enter, and you'll now notice that all my letters have changed here, and I just have the first letter of that name. So let's go ahead and copy this all the way down again. And you notice it's changed all of them at one time. Now, you know what? I would really prefer that they were capitalized. So we can actually put 2 functions together. So let's go back to this field, and let's add in front of this upper. We need to put in parentheses the fact that we want to gather the information from the left. And now we're basically say, convert whatever information we find when we do this left into upper. So let's go ahead and do that. And you notice now we now have a capital F. Again, we'll copy it all the way down. And we'll copy that whole column, and we'll go back up to the top, and we'll paste it special, so we just get our values. And I'm going to go up here and put in gender again. I'm done with column F. We've done our work there. We can discard that column. So notice how we utilize 2 functions together. We use both the left function and we use the proper function. I could have done the same thing with the lowercase. I could have done the same thing. I did it with uppercase. I could do it with proper. So I can combine things. I could even say left, grab the first letter from the left, and grab the last letter from the right and combine them. So you can combine functions. Just remember, whenever you're combining a function, it only has one equal sign, and that goes at the beginning. Everything else after that is in parentheses. You do not need to add additional equal signs. So let me just give you a quick example. One more time, I'm going to go ahead and insert 1 column to the left, because this is pretty important. And what I'm going to do here under brand is I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to make it in lowercase. I'm only going to grab the first initial. So we'll put in our equal sign. We'll click on brand, and then we'll put a comma in, and we'll say that we want, let's put in the function first. Let's put in lower parentheses left parentheses. We want to work on D2, and we want to grab the first 2 characters in this case. So we're telling it to grab the first 2 characters of cell D2 and convert them to lowercase. And there we go. Again, if you notice, when we look at our formula, our functions only need 1 equal sign. So normally you always think of a function with an equal sign. You only need the first one to have an equal sign. So let's just delete this column. We're all done with it. And we'll move on to another part of our spreadsheet. Now, one of the problems that's very common when you're doing with data is sometimes leading zeros fall off. Why do leading zeros fall off? Well, the spreadsheet gets confused as to whether it's a number or text. And when it is a number, it just assumes that you do not need to add a leading zero, because we normally do not do that. If I was told you 17, I wouldn't put 3 zeros in front of it. So the problem we run into with zip codes, some zip codes start with a 0. So we need to adjust for that. And there's a couple ways we can do that. I'm going to go to a special sheet that I've set up with zip codes so we can look at those different things. And this works with anytime you're dealing with leading zeros. So you notice here our first zip code is fine. We have 5 digits. It looks great. Our second one's also fine. But when we get down to our third one, you'll notice in green that this is missing a leading zero. So we need to do two things. First of all, before we do anything else, we want to click on this column that we're going to put our information into, and we want to format it as plain text. I've already done it in this case, but we want to make sure it says plain text because we don't want it to then just drop the zero again. Now I could just type the zero in, but then I'd have to go through the whole list, look for all the ones that are missing the zero and put the zeros in. So I don't want to do that. I want to automate it. And what I can use is a function called len. Len simply counts the number of characters in the cell that you're asking. So I have a little example over here showing you len. Let's go back a little bit further here. This little table here just shows an example. We're using a column of numbers here. You notice there's 2 digits there, 3 digits, 4 digits, etc. And I've used the len function. And you notice right here it says equals len parentheses F2. So it says, how many characters are in F2? Well, there's 1. How many characters are there in F7? Well, in this case, there's 6 characters. So that's the way the len works. Now we can use the len to help us add back our leading zeros. So let's look at the formula we've placed in this cell. And we're going to use the len function plus a little bit of additional information. So the first thing we're doing is actually the first function we're utilizing in this particular equation is the if function. The if function is used whenever you want to make a determination whether something is of one state or one number or equals something. So if the first thing we're saying if, and that basically says if this is the case, then do this. If it is not, then do something different. So in this case, we have the if statement, and then we've embedded inside there the len statement. So we know that len A5, we'll look at A5, has 4 digits in it. So we know it's going to return 4 digits. But what we said here is if len 5 equals 5, which would be a typical zip code, then just go ahead and put the zip code in right from the spreadsheet. Just put that in. So whenever it equals F5, it simply puts in the zip code that is shown in column A because it is correct. After the comma, if it's not correct, it will do this operation. And this operation basically says, take a 0, in quotes again, put an ampersand, and then attach it to a 5. Now remember before we talked about concatenation, this is simply an example of utilizing concatenation within a complex formula. So again, we'll walk through this one more step. We've asked the question, if len equals 5, put in the value because we know that is correct. It's not missing any characters. The comma then tells us if it is not, what do we want to do? And we've put in concatenate a 0 to the front of it. Now that worked out very well when we're missing 1 0. The problem is if we're missing 2 zeros, it doesn't work because all it does is simply add 1 0 to it. So we can make this a little more complicated if we'd like. We can simply say we have one column here, and we'll go through and then check that column to make sure everything looks okay. So this column was missing some zeros on a couple of these, and we were able to add it in this case through our first function. This one's a little more difficult because we're missing 2. So you notice when we've done our first operation, it's added 1 0, but that's not enough. So we put another column in just basically to do the same thing again. And it basically looks at this column, uses the len function, and says, are there 5 digits there? If there's 5 digits, that's fine. We'll take that number. If there's not 5 digits, we need to add another 0 to it. So you notice in this case, we simply have taken the len function. Again, we counted for 5 just as we did before. We said if it's 5, we'll take it. If not, we need to add a 0. And this 0 really should be in parentheses. The reason why we got away with that in that case is it was a single 0. If we would have more than 1 0 and we did not put it in parentheses, it would again drop the leading 0. So we'd only be adding 1 0 to it. But that worked. So we were able to get our full 5 digits. Now we could keep doing this over and over and over again with columns, but what we can do instead is we can make this really complex and confusing looking equation, which I'll be talking about here in a moment. But we've basically asked the question, if the length or the len of the number of characters in A3 is equal to 5, put in A3 because that's okay. We then said if it's not, go in and test it again. And our question is, if len 3 A3 equals 4, then we need to add a 0 to it, concatenate a 0 to it. And then we said if it's not, we're going to ask the question again. So each time we keep asking, if it equals, we're okay. If it's not, we go back and we ask that question again. So in this case, if it comes out to be 3, then we know we had to add 2 zeros to it. And then we ask it again. And if it comes out to be 2 characters, that means we need to add 3 zeros. And we ask it again. If it's 1 character, that means we need to add 4 zeros. So you can see that in this case, we were able to get our result here. In this case, where we were missing 3 zeros, you notice that it was able to provide those 3 zeros. In this case, where we were missing 4 leading zeros, it was able to put the 4 leading zeros in there. And by the way, that's a fake zip code that I made up. There is no 00001 zip code in the US. But that's just to show you how you can use the len function for a number of things. Now, there's some other things you can use len for. Let's say you have a group of student names and you want to see how many characters are in each student name. You could simply use the len function to count them. So let's go back to our original name section here, and let's just go in and let's add to the right of this one column to work in, and we'll simply use our len function. So equals len parentheses this. Now, wouldn't we do this, you notice it's going to count the number of characters, but remember, a space is considered a character. So you notice that it's counting the space as the 10th character in this case. If we drag this down, we can quickly see how many characters in each name. So you'd be able to tell how many characters are used in the name. Now, if we knew there was always a space and we didn't want to count that space in it, we could simply, again, combine 2 things. So we have our function there. We could put a minus sign and we could subtract 1 from it. And you notice now it would give us the number of characters minus the 1 space that is there. So again, you can use multiple functions together. You can use functions and formulas together. Just make sure the order of operations is correct. So we're done with this column. So let's just discard this. So again, remember, len counts the number of characters, whether they're numbers or letters. It's usually used with text more often than it is with numbers, but we used it with both in these cases. The next thing I want to show you is probably one of the most powerful tools that you can do with a spreadsheet, and that is called VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP lets us take information from one table, find a common factor between that and a second table, and then get information from the second table. So let me just show you how we might want to do that. So I have placed in this sheet here, our first sheet, a variety of information. You notice we have a name, address, we have all sorts of things there. What we don't have, though, is we don't have the vehicle that they drive, and we need to know which vehicle they drive. So we would need to either type it into each of these, or we can simply use this sheet here that has the vehicle in it. Let me drag it over so we can see it a little better. This sheet has the vehicle in it. It also has the state in it. So what we need to do is look at this spreadsheet and find one column that is unique for every name and is available in both of them. So you notice real quickly that using the state would not work because we have multiple people with the same state. What do these have in common, though? You notice that both of them have a credit card number. and the credit card number is unique per person. So whenever you're doing a vertical lookup, it's very important that you find something that is unique. Now, one of the things that we might look for in some cases would be an address. Addresses are very problematic when you're using a vertical lookup because someone might put in Settlers Lane, or they might put in Settlers LN, and those would not be the same. So when we did the vertical lookup, they would not match exactly. Also, sometimes spaces are different. Periods might be added for abbreviations. So street addresses are pretty bad. Names work somewhat, but a lot of people might have the same name. And obviously states don't work very well. Telephone numbers and credit card numbers are usually unique numbers. Even birthdays are not unique. We could use that to look with, but we're going to find that we might have people with the same birthday. So in this case, we're going to use credit card numbers. What we need to do first is we need to prepare our first page that we're going to take the data from. This is our page we're going to call our range or our lookup table. So we're going to create a lookup table on this page. Now the first thing I want to do is I'm going to name the data on this page as a range. So I'm going to highlight the whole range. And I'm going to then go up to the top to where it says data, and I'm going to go to data and I'm going to say I want to name a range. And it's a little bit different. Here's one of our differences. In Excel, you would do it up in the upper left-hand corner. You could type in the range name. You could also do it the same way we're doing it, but in Google Docs, you have to do it over here. So we clicked on that, popped up a little window, and it says named range number 1. Now we could use that, but I just want to call it, I'm going to call it credit card number. And it doesn't really matter what we call it. The only exceptions are you don't want to use something that would be the same as a cell number. So we don't want to call it A2. We don't want to call it C7. We don't want to call it A2 colon B3 because, again, that would be the name of a range on its own. So we don't want to do that. So we're going to call it CCN for credit card number. And we're going to say done here. And now anything we want to do with this range, we don't have to refer to the cells that are in the range. We don't have to say A1 colon C151. We can simply call it CCN for credit card number. Now, there's a couple things special that you need to remember when using vertical lookup. Vertical lookup requires that the lookup table be in alphabetical or numerical order. So what we need to do is we need to sort this range so that the credit card numbers are in numerical order. So I've already highlighted the range. I'll simply right click on it. I will choose sort range. And I'm going to say our range has a header on it. I don't want to mix you in, but I want to sort credit cards and I want it to be in ascending order. So I simply click on sort and it will display all of my credit cards in number order. This is very important that you do this step. If you forget to do this step, vertical lookup will not work properly. There are other ways around it, but it's just easier to remember to put them in order. Now you might say, well, that mixed them all up from the other sheet. Well, we don't care because we now have a unique characteristic that we're going to look for. So we're going to look through all the people that are on our other sheet, find the person with the credit card, and we'll be able to tell which vehicle they drive from that. So let's go back to our original sheet. We can put this anywhere we want to. On the lookup table, it's required that we have the key that we're going to look for in the first column. But on the sheet where we're going to do the looking up from, we do not need to have it. So we can put it anywhere we want it. So let's go ahead and let's put it right here, just so you can see it easier, after the credit card number. So we're going to go ahead and just insert a column to the right. And again, it could be anywhere on the sheet. And we're going to simply come in here and type in the formula. And the formula will be equals V look up. That's it. Parentheses. Now we need to then give it its proper arguments. The first thing we need to tell is, what do we want to use for a key? So we want to look for the credit card number because we know that's a unique key. So we put that in. We then put in a comma, and now we need to tell it, hey, where should I look for this information? Now remember, that's why it's nice that we've named the range, so we can simply type in the range name, CCN. was our range name. So we put that in. That's our range name. We could, in fact, though, put in the information we want, but we'd have to put in the whole cell reference. In that case, it's from another page, so it would again include an exclamation mark and a bunch of other text. So it's much easier to pre-name our range. We then put in another comma and say, hey, when you look in this range CCN, which column do you want the information from? Well, we know the first column is the credit card number, and we already have the credit card number. Let's go back and just take a quick peek because I don't remember where it's at. Let's just look at it for a second. And we notice that the vehicle is actually in the third column. So let's go back to our function, and let's say that we want the data from our third column. Now, it's not the third column. Doesn't mean it's letter C. It means it's the third column in that range. That range can be setting anywhere on the spreadsheet. So if the range started at G, column 3 would be J, or would be I. So in this case, we want column 3 from our range. One last argument we need to add. We can use this as it is, but what will happen is vertical lookup, if it finds something that is similar enough, will give us a result. And close is good in horseshoes, but close is not good enough in vertical lookup. So we need to add a comma, and then we put in the word false. The reason why I put in false means only find the exact match. Don't try and find something. Don't try and outsmart me by putting the information in there. So there we go. There's our vertical lookup. Again, the cell we're looking in, the range we're looking in, the column we want to return, and the fact that we want it to be an exact match. I will now press enter, and hopefully we magically will have the car show up. And we can drag this all the way down, and all the cars would show up. So there's all of our cars. Now, let's just experiment for a second and say, Anthony, are you sure that worked? Let's just test it. Instead of looking at the third column this time, let's look at the first column, which should be the credit card number. So we'll put a 1 in there, and you'll notice that if we did that, we could go down the line, and you can quickly see that the credit card numbers match exactly. So let's go back to our original function here with our third column and get our cars. We could then do another additional lookups from that same range and get the state that the car was registered in. Let's go ahead and sort this, or center this a little bit here. So we'll get a little bit more space. And there we go. So there we have our cars, and we brought that information in. Now, remember, just as in all of our other cases, it's not really a 2009 Toyota Tacoma. It's actually this function. So what we need to do is, if we want this data to be utilized for other things later on, we want to convert it into a true car name. So we would copy the column, and then we would use the paste special to make sure that just the value was there, not the formula. And now we have a 2009 Toyota Tacoma. If anyone would like to buy one, we have one available here. Now let's move this over to the left because I think it'll look a little better. Let's make the whole thing left. There we go. So that is vertical lookup. There is also an H lookup for horizontal lookup, but it's not used as commonly, and it's a little more difficult to use. But vertical lookup works very well, and I could actually have multiple tables that I'm bringing data in from, as long as I have one key that's common between the table and the data lookup table. So I need to have 2 of them that match. Now let's take a look at a couple other things here. Let's go back to our vehicles sheet. You know what? I'm interested in the average age of each of these cars. Now, it has the year there, which makes it very easy to figure out the age. The problem is it has the rest of the car name there. So if I was doing this in Excel, I could use something called text to columns, and it would separate based on the spaces. Well, in Google, it uses something called split. So we're going to type in split. We're going to tell it what cell we want to split, which is our Ford Fiesta. We're then going to place a comma, and then we need to tell it what the delimiter is. And the delimiter is just a fancy word for what do you want to use to break the things apart. So we got to put in parentheses because we want a space. And then we simply press enter, and you notice it divided every time there was a space. So we now end up with 3 columns, 1993 Ford Fiesta. We don't really care too much about the Ford Fiesta. If we wanted to recombine it again, we could use concatenate to put it back together, but we don't care about that. All we really want is to be able to get the year. So let's just take our formula and drag it down. Before I drag this function down, though, I want to show you something. In most functions, you would see a formula in each of the cells, but notice we only see the split here. Even though the split is only here, this is still a formula that's giving this information. So if I would come in here and remove this cell, for example, you notice that I would take everything out because that function is giving me data in 3 cells. If I would come in here and change something in this cell, it'll automatically change over there. Let's make this into a Ford. Let's say Ford Model T. And you notice, again, it works and splits things apart. Again, if I want this information to be the number instead of the function, formula or function, I need to do a copy and then paste special. So let's revert this back because there are no 1993 Ford Model Ts that I know of. And let's take these 3 columns. Actually, let's do this first. Let's go all the way down and put our split formula all the way to the bottom. And up went a little bit too far, and then I popped a little bit too high. So just get onto the bottom of this. By the way, someone asked me the other day, what happens if you get down to the bottom and you can't get exactly in the right spot? Well, you can hold the shift key down to do your copying and use the arrow key to move up and down, so that'll give you better control. So I noticed it broke all of our cars apart. Some of them have even 4 or 5 different parts. We don't care about those though, because all we can really care about is the year. So let's come in here and now let's convert these into values instead of formulas. So we copy, paste special, paste in values. Now how could we find the average year of the car? Well, we can simply use the function called average. We're going to put it over here just for fun. We're going to put in equals. We're going to type in average. And then we're going to tell it that we want to look at all the cars that are in all the dates that are in column D. So instead of saying D1 through D whatever, we can simply put in D colon D, and that tells us we want the whole column. Press enter, and it will give us our average age of our car, average year of our car years average to be 2002. Now that's not the average age. We have to do something a little different to find the age. So let's find the average age instead. So we need to add another formula or function to this. Let's just move this out of the way for right now. Not that far away. Well, let's come back and let's actually find out how old this car is approximately today. So what we would need is we would need today's year. So we could simply put the year in here, and we could do it that way. Or we could use the function called today equal. This will always tell you what the date is. But we don't need to be that fancy because all we really care about is the year. So let's just come in here and put in 2015 in each of these cells. Now, if I would copy this down, we'd run into a problem because it would go 2015, 2016, etc. So I need to copy that and then highlight all the cells first. Notice I'm not copying down like I did before. I'm highlighting it first, and then I'm going to then paste directly into each of those cells. So there's 2015. So if we want to find the age of the car, of course, we can come in here and put equals this year minus this year. And that means that that car is now 22 years old. Just a little bit older than my car. You notice that this random list gave us some rather old cars. So there we go. Let's get rid of this other data. It's just getting in the way, making it confusing looking. So let's delete a few columns here. Now, if we wanted to find the average age of our car, we could simply put in equals average. And again, remember we want the whole column, so we simply put in F colon F, enter. And that's our average age of our cars. So the average age of these cars is 12.48, and the decimals keep on going forward. Now, I don't really want to show it that way. I just want something very simple to see. So I could come in and I could actually reformat this by going up to format, but there's a quick little way to do that right here. And this is available both in Google and in Excel, where we can increase and decrease the decimal points. So let's go ahead and decrease the decimal points so we get something a little more reasonable. Now you notice what happened. Watch when I click on this, it will change from 487 to 49. It looks like it rounded it. And it's actually displaying a rounded number, but it is truly not a rounded number. And to prove that to you, I will show you what happens if we go in here and say equals. You will see that this cell is truly not rounded. It still has all the same data in it. So you have to be aware that when you use these remove and add decimal points, it looks like it's rounding it, but it's truly not. It's just giving you a rounded display for your viewing purposes. So it would not change your math, it would not throw your math off if you then did a calculation with that, because it would not be rounded. So that's the average age of our car. Now you notice the parsing or the splitting up or the what we call Excel calls text to columns worked pretty good well with our car years. It didn't work very well with our car names. Anytime you have multiple delimitors, it becomes more difficult. That is one of the reasons why it's always better when you're designing a spreadsheet in the first place to keep fields separate when possible. It's always easier to combine fields by using concatenation than it is to split them apart or parse them apart or break them into columns. So if I was going to create this spreadsheet, instead of putting the vehicle in the cell, I'd probably put in the vehicle year and the vehicle model in two separate cells. That would make it a lot easier for manipulating the data later on. But in this case, it worked out fine because all we really cared about was the particular year of the car. Now, last time in Spreadsheets 101, I mentioned we were going to talk about conditional formatting. Conditional formatting works along these ways. So let's take a look at these states here. And let's say I wanted to color code them so I could see certain states. So if I click on this column, I then go to data. And by the way, Google Spreadsheets has recently redone conditional formatting. So if you've not used conditional formatting recently in Google Spreadsheets, it's now a lot more robust. So let's get on to conditional formatting, and it opens up a little box to our right, and it basically says, what's the condition you want? Well, first of all, here's what range it's applying it to. It says look in range BB, which is what we want, that whole column, and then I'm going to say what I want. And here's all my choices I have. I'm going to say that I want the text to be exactly NY for New York. Let's put it in the right tense. And I'm going to say every time it's New York, I want it to be dark blue. So I click on done, you'll notice that if I look at my column, all my New Yorks will be in dark blue. Now, the nice thing about conditional formatting is we can keep adding additional rules. So I'm going to say again, if the cell text is exactly TX, I want to make it a bright orange. So now you notice all my Texas cars showed up. And I can keep adding additional rules to this as much as I'd like. Let's put another state in here. Put in Connecticut. And let's make Connecticut a light blue. Now you notice Connecticut. Let's add another one. Let's put in Pennsylvania. And by the way, I do not need to have all my formatting characteristics be the same. I could say I want to have all the cells that are empty marked in one way. So just because I've been using text as exactly, I don't have to use that for the column. I can use any of the different varieties. So let's put in PA here. Let's make PA a bright yellow. Now you'll see PA. So you notice that we can put color codes in here, and we can keep adding additional choices. And you can do this pretty much for anything. And if you decide you don't want a rule, you can change the rule by clicking on it and editing it. Or you can simply go to the right, click on the little trash can, and it will remove the rule. So you'll watch as I click on this, all the New Yorks will no longer be blue, and then the Texas will no longer be orange, etc., etc. So I'm going to delete all that rule. So that's when we want to use a specific color to mark something conditionally formatting. It's very common that you'll do this like for negative numbers or positive numbers, so it's very quick and easy to see when the condition is being met. Now, you can also use something called conditional formatting for ranges. So we have our car years here. Let's go ahead and click on this column. Let's again go to our conditional formatting, and let's add a new rule. But you notice on the top now, we're not going to use the single color. We're going to come over to the color scale. And I'm going to say that I want to put a color scale in here where my minimum value, in other words, my oldest cars are dark blue, and my newest cars are bright yellow. And what it'll do is it'll create a continuum, and you notice here it shows us which cars are newer and which cars are older based on the colors. And it tries to blend them together. And we could use a different color scale if we like. Let's change that. Let's make our oldest cars be white and our newest cars be black. And now we have a black and white scale. Let's change it one more time. Let's go down here. We're going to say that we want our minimum car color to be red. We want our maximum car color to be yellow. And we can click on done, and it will give us a gradient between red and yellow to show us the newest and the oldest cars. So we have two different types of conditional formatting we can utilize. The last thing I want to talk about today are pivot tables. And pivot tables sound very intimidating, and a lot of people that use spreadsheets all the time hesitate to use pivot tables because they think they're rather difficult. Well, there is a little bit of difficulty to them. They're not really beginner's information, but they're definitely intermediate. And Google Sheets has made it extremely simple to do a pivot table. So let's go ahead and let's create a pivot table. I think I have a table prepared here for us right now. I have created some data that we had before, and let's go back to this other sheet here. Let's find the right one. Okay, so I've created this, and let's go ahead and use our split formula to go do exactly what we did before. We're going to split the cars into years. So we're just going to get a practice of doing the same exact thing again. We're going to split our cars into years, so we know how old our cars are. So there's our split. And again, we're going to copy this, and we're going to paste special. And we're going to throw the rest of this away because we really don't care. But notice what happened when I pasted special. It couldn't continue to use the formula because now there's nothing to split. So we're all set. So now we have both our state and our car date. So let's type in date for the, let's type in year, I guess, for the car year. So now we have these items. So let's go ahead and let's create a pivot table. Now, to do a pivot table, we need to gather the range of information we want. And you know what? I'm not really interested in this, so let's just move this out of the way. Let's put these two together. And this is the range I'm truly interested in, is the year and the state where the car is from. So once I highlight those two, the next step is to create a pivot table. We go to Data, we go to Pivot Table, and the pivot table comes up, and it basically says, what do you want to put into the pivot table? And we can add rows and we can add columns. For the rows, let's go ahead and add the state in which the car came from. And you notice it now lists the cars, and states. Now here's something that usually confuses people when they're doing pivot tables. You notice I didn't say I wanted to put a column of data in there. I said I wanted to put rows. Well, the reason why they call it rows is we're actually putting in a row for each piece of data. So that's the hard part to remember. We're not putting in a column of data. We're putting in rows of data that happen to be in the same column. Now we could add multiple columns here. We could add different things, but what we want to do next is we want to work with a value. So we're going to come down here where it says add field for values, and we're going to pick the year that the car was created. Now, you notice that when we do this, it has a second argument we need to complete, a second question. It says, okay, we're using car year, but what do you want to do with it? We don't want to add it together. We want to simply go through and we want to count how many there is for each year, for each state. So once we do that, it'll show us how many cars are in each of our states. So again, we used our pivot table to count how many cars were in each state. Let's go back to our pivot table here again real quick. And let's just start that from the beginning because I actually left one thing out. So let's go ahead and we will delete our table here. And we would just create one again for practice. So again, we have our data we want to utilize. We go to Data, Pivot Table Report. Again, we want to insert rows. So we click on this and we say we want the state that the car is from. We want to add values. So again, we chose the year and we chose that we wanted to count the number of cars for each year, for each state, I'm sorry. So that gives us a count of how many cars are from each state. Now the other thing we could do is we could find out what the average age of cars were in each state. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're going to add another field. And again, we're going to use year. But this time, instead of choosing count, we're going to come in here and we're going to say we want to find the average. And this will give us the average year of the car. Now, not the average age, but the average year. So you notice that the average year of car in Connecticut was 2007, whereas the average age of cars in Indiana was 1999. So there's a significant difference in the ages of those cars from those different states. So pivot tables are a quick way to look at data and get an idea. So again, there's a variety of things you could do. We could also choose to find the minimum and the maximum car values for each state. So we know now that the maximum car years for each of these states are displayed here. Let's add another field to this and let's display the year with the minimum car date. So now we see that the oldest cars in California were 1992s. The newest cars were 2012s. So again, that is pivot tables, and that completes today's webinar. Just as a reminder, all the information for today's webinar can be found at tiny.cc/spark, SPARCC 214. There you will find the recorded copy of this video. So if you'd like to watch it in the future, you will find help guides for the session, including that list of functions we talked about. Also, we would greatly appreciate if you would fill out the session evaluation form. Just click on the little session evaluation, and that gives us an idea of whether we're meeting your needs or not for these webinars. And we love to have your evaluation and any suggestions you might have. Also, there's a quiz. If you take this quiz and you pass, you will receive an email with a PDF giving you 1 hour of contact for professional development purposes. And it's signed by our county ESC, and you can present that to whoever might be responsible for maintaining your hours of professional development. While you're at the site, please also be sure to check out our schedule of upcoming PD events. You'll notice that upcoming next week we have one on Google Sites for schools, and then we're going to be having internet safety and so forth. So from here you can see what professional development is coming up. You can also click on the home page, and it will give you a little calendar of upcoming events, not only our webinars, but other events, seminars, conferences, etc. in the area. Also, I strongly recommend that you click on the subscribe to Sparklines newsletter. This will allow you to stay up to date with our latest technology integration information. You'll receive one approximately every one to two per month on the average, and it'll tell you what webinars are coming up, what professional development opportunities coming up. And we've added a couple new features, including one of our favorite sites that we found over the last month, so we give you a little bit of content. Again, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this session. Sorry for the delay with the technical difficulties in the beginning. We hope to see you again over the coming weeks for more educational technology webinars. And please remember, you can always watch at your leisure. You can even binge watch if you like all of our recorded webinars. I think we're up to 14 or 15 now. They will show up here when they're done being recorded. Take care. Thank you for your attention.